Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of Barrow Council's Executive Committee. My name is Councillor Lee Roberts. I'm the Deputy Chair of the committee, standing in for Councillor Brooke. First of all, I need to remind you all of the domestic arrangements. It is important that all participants conduct themselves in the appropriate manner. Please put your mobile phones on silent. Any member or officer wishes to speak, please raise your hand via the raise hand facility in Zoom. If you're not speaking, please mute your microphone until invited to speak. Even if you're not speaking, you may be shown on the screen. If the computer picks up any noise, you'll be shown on the live feed. So please remember this while the meeting is being conducted. And please do not interrupt speakers. Members lose connection to the meeting, we will adjourn for 10 minutes to assist them in reconnecting. I would remind you that this meeting is being streamed live on the Council's YouTube channel, so that members of the public in their masses, I presume, can view the meeting, except where any confidential items or exempt items are being discussed. To vote on matters, I'll ask the Democratic Services Manager to manage this process. At this point, members will be requested to unmute their microphones. A brief pause, a mover and seconder will be requested, and a roll call of members will be undertaken. If there's no dissent of the meeting, then the decision will be taken as agreed. Please reply with "I vote," then remute your microphone. That's the formalities, members. Let's proceed with part one. So agenda item 1. Do we have any apologies or any substitute members, please?
Chairman, can I take the roll call, please?
Yes, certainly.
Councillor Barlow.
Present.
Biggins.
Present.
Blizzard.
Present.
We have apologies from Councillor Brooke. Councillor Edwards.
Present.
Hamilton.
Present.
McClure.
Present.
Maddox.
Present.
Morgan.
Present.
Pemberton.
Present.
Roberts.
Present.
Ronson.
Present.
We have also apologies from the Chief Executive. Director of Resources.
Present.
Director of People and Place.
Present.
Head of Legal and Governance.
Present.
Assistant Director of Housing. Jan.
Present.
Development Services Manager, Planning Policy.
Present.
Alec Profit. Alec, you're on mute. Tracingham.
Present.
Sandra Kemsley.
Present.
That's it, Chair. We might have a problem with Alec Profit's connection.
Okay, we'll just run through the next few items till we get there, see if it resolves itself. Thanks, John. So, agenda item 2, urgent items. I don't believe we've had any urgent items coming for this meeting. Agenda item 3, delegations. Are there any members who wish to move any delegated matter, non-delegated, and which will be decided by a majority of members present and voting at the meeting? Right, no one's indicated. Agenda item 4, admission of public and press. To consider whether public and press need to be excluded from the meeting during consideration of any items on the agenda. Again, no one's indicated, so we'll take that as agreed. So, accessible for public and press. Agenda item 5, declarations of interest. Has anybody got any declarations of interest? If anything comes up during the meeting, please indicate and declare any interest if a matter arises that you believe is appropriate. Agenda item 6, confirmation of minutes. Do you agree that the minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of October 2020 be signed as a correct record?
Agreed.
Thank you. The minutes of the meeting will be signed at the next practical opportunity. That's agreed. Thank you. Agenda item 7, public participation. There'll be no request to ask a question, make representation or presentation or petition at the meeting. Agenda item 8, got a presentation and an update from the Resilience Forum. So can I hand over to Alec and Tracy, please?
Thank you very much for inviting us today, members. Alec and I are going to do a little bit of a double act on this one, and he's just bringing up the presentation as we speak. To give a little bit of context, what we wanted to do today was just provide a little bit of an overview of the work that's taken place over the last 8 months since the onset of the pandemic, and then start to talk about where we're up to today. Happy to take any questions, obviously, throughout this presentation. However, with the way that I view Zoom, I can't see any raised hands. So if anybody is able to keep an eye on that for me, please, that would be really appreciated. So if we can move to the next slide, please, Alec.
Can everyone see that? Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as I've just touched on, we're going to give a little bit of an overview on the emergency response. What we really wanted to focus on, though, was the role that the community has played very much in driving the response and what's happened, and the collaborative work that's taken place and how we can continue to work in that way going forward. So if we can move on, Alec. Just casting our minds back to 8 months ago, there was a really proactive response across the borough. A number of community groups began to stand up before the national lockdown being announced, and Age UK and St Mary's Hospice did a fantastic piece of work in setting up an emergency helpline locally. It was phenomenally well promoted, and an awful lot of people were contacting them. Then we have the national lockdown, and the county-wide response started to be picked up as well. So we had an 0800 emergency helpline number put in place across the county, and very quickly each of the 6 district areas in Cumbria set up locality district level hubs, which were to very much provide that support locally, using the knowledge and relationships that we had across the areas. The county-wide local resilience forum was also stepped up at this point, and we then stepped up in each again of the 6 areas, the local resilience forums. And the way that we're running the forum in Barrow is myself as the area manager of the county council is chairing that, alongside Alec from the Borough Council as the co-chair for it. So it really is a truly joint piece of work, but the agenda is absolutely set by everybody around that table. As time moved on, within the first few weeks, the Borough Council stepped in to provide support and capacity to Age UK and St Mary's to help with that emergency helpline. And then working together, we integrated that to the overarching county helpline. So there was just one number that provided support to people. It didn't matter whether you contacted the St Mary's number, the 0800 number, it came through to the same place, it got the same response and the same help. If we can move on, Alec. I'm not expecting you to see this in a huge amount of detail, but what we wanted to do with this was just give a flavour for the structures that were set up really, really quickly. An amazing piece of work was done by the community and coordinated by a number of people on the ground, in effect setting up 5 what were called resource distribution points that would make sure that every ward in the borough was covered with an organisation that could help supply food, essential supplies, and do that vital signposting for anybody that needed any support. Absolutely, we recognised at that very early stage that it wasn't just going to be about food and pharmacy support that was needed. Wider issues around financial well-being, mental health were all coming through very early doors. So again, it was making sure that the key organisations locally were plugged into that response. So whatever anybody presented with, we were able to ensure that they got to the right place to get the right support. Again, Alec, if we can move on. A few stats here, just in practical terms. In the first wave for Barrow, we had 518 different households from across the borough contact the helpline. That amounted to just over 2,500 separate interactions. So a number of those households contacted us on more than one occasion. So perhaps it was a repeat prescription, or perhaps they needed support another week or month down the line. Of those 2,500, just over 1,200 of those cases and calls were dealt with specifically in Barrow by the local hub. The hub locally was a fantastic piece of work, bringing together staff from the Borough Council and all departments in the County Council. We had colleagues from the area team, Highways Department, Focus Families, Housing, and it really was one team. Everybody absolutely working together on cases to get the best support for people. And in there, I've just put a little bit of a breakdown of what the asks were of the hub. As you'll see, the vast majority were around access to food and medicine due to the lockdown. The 87 that needed other types of support or no direct support was a real mixture. That may have been where somebody needed more specialist mental health support, for example, social care support, etc., where we made sure they got through to the departments or agencies that they needed. So again, moving on. Okay, so that was the specific response itself, and then moving on to look at the resilience group that was set up. The way the resilience group works at the moment is there's fortnightly meetings, and we have 20 to 30 regular attendees of these fortnightly meetings from across a huge range of organisations. And they represent statutory services, health, borough, county council, police, third sector, and then we've also got community groups attending as well. Recognising though that we can't have everybody on the one call, but there's far more people and organisations want to be involved, who are involved and are doing great pieces of work. We've got a much wider distribution list where we've got over 80 different organisations and individuals as part and parcel of that, and information shared regularly across that distribution list, both as a whole group, but also individual organisations are contacting each other out with this as well as issues arise. The idea behind the resilience group was it would very much provide that coordinating body to help to bring together the right people to look at the issues that were arising and try and come up with collaborative solutions for them. We've had lots of different examples and pieces of work that have come up. I've listed a few of them on there, but one I would like to just touch on was the middle one there, support to children with headsets, because for me that was a really good example of how that forum has come together to work. So one individual on that group raised an issue that they'd been made aware of through their work about a number of children who didn't have the space and the ability to do homework, to concentrate, because they didn't have the space within their home. And the suggestion was that actually by providing them headsets, that would enable them to be able to do that. The group came together around that, and a real joined up response was made. So through the County Council Local Committee, funding was found for the headsets. Working with the schools, they identified the numbers that would be needed for those children that it was felt that really would benefit from this. Drop Zone agreed to coordinate the project, and other partners came on board too. Within a fortnight, the funding was found, the headsets were ordered, and very quickly distributed to families. Feedback from schools and individuals has been really positive about what a difference that's made to people. So whilst it might seem a small example, for me, that's just real testament to that joint working and that collaborative approach everybody's adopted. On the opposite end of the scale, the group has also brought organisations together for some large collaborative bids. So originally, we submitted a bid for £75,000 to the Community Foundation that was successful. It was the first one across the county that was a collaborative bid across multiple organisations. Alec will correct me if I'm wrong, but it was 13 organisations that were part of that single bid. And that picked up issues such as making sure that there was adequate support for food provision, mental health, and other support in place for our families. We'll touch on it later, but we have also just submitted another bid, which we hope will be successful as well. Moving on. So that was a little bit of a whistle stop of what has happened in the past. Again, we've moved into the second national lockdown, as we all know. A leaflet is currently in the process of being delivered to all households in Cumbria at the moment. Again, outlining key contacts for support for people. And if we can move on, Alec. So yeah, the helpline, whilst it was never ceased, the helpline is being actively promoted now. Talking to colleagues in the County Council, the numbers of calls into the helpline have been growing with the active comms, but nowhere near the levels that we received previously. And at the moment, the majority of calls coming in are from people who've been told to isolate and are looking for help to access priority delivery slots at supermarkets. So it's again going back to that access of food. We're starting to closely monitor what's coming through that helpline. And whilst the calls are being dealt with centrally at the moment, we've been working locally to make sure that the systems and the team are in place to step up to handle any cases that need to be dealt with in the locality if necessary. The structure is still very much there, and we've done the preparation work so we can stand it up as is. I've already touched on the second collaborative WID that we've done. And at that point, I'm going to take breath and hand over to Alec, who is going to pick up the next few slides and talk about the Hardship Fund as well.
Thanks, Tracy. Can everyone hear me? Yep. Okay, so the second bid for the Community Foundation went in, I think, the week before last, and we are just awaiting confirmation that is going to be agreed, and that's to put some a little bit more resource into the structure should either lockdown be extended or we have significant issues with people self-isolating. But we are confident that the bid will be accepted because we have had quite a lot of contacts in developing it. Alongside that, we are also using our own COVID Hardship Fund, which is money that is Borough Council held, but what we've tried to do is to identify the need through the Barrow Community LRF, and in particular we've looked at childcare for vulnerable children. We've also funded some school uniform and equipment need, we're just setting up a white goods provision voucher scheme and a similar one to leisure, but they're just kind of 4 flavours of some of the bids that we've accepted, and we need to make sure that whatever we're funding is COVID-related financial hardship and gets help into those households. But again, it is about our partners identifying the need and referring people in, and we will deliver the funding for those schemes. We're also just in the process of setting up a financial wellbeing summit to ensure that people who are suffering financial hardship due to COVID understand where the key strands of help are, how to access them, spot any gaps, and then also make sure that the support offer is joined up, and that we are ensuring that both our traditionally vulnerable families who are suffering further due to COVID, and also newly vulnerable families who might be new to accessing support through welfare state, have got access to the help. Tracy's team have also been very active in setting up a multi-agency Christmas holiday task and finish group. There's been a lot of press coverage over potential impacts over the Christmas holidays. We feel that we are in a position where we're confident we're mapping and identifying some potential need and setting up some assistance, and that's comprising organisations like the Barrow Food Bank, as well as our own LRF distribution points, particularly our most active at Springmount on Walney. We've got education consortium representatives from the county council, so that we're confident that we're getting a decent communication line with schools who are key in identifying vulnerability and families who might be starting to struggle. Obviously, the Salvation Army, who are very active around Christmas, Age UK, Project John, Family Action, the Multicultural Forum as well, to make sure that people who maybe aren't kind of able to access help, maybe due to language issues, are a key part of that process as well as Tracy's community development team from the county council. We're looking at food hampers, toys and vouchers, as well as wellbeing packs for families, and also some more luxury wellbeing hampers for people who are socially isolated over Christmas under the current circumstances. So, I mean, one thing that we are collectively keen to continue to do, and one job that won't kind of ever stop in as the emergency continues and recovery commences, is we are looking to identify where people are starting to struggle and becoming vulnerable. There's obviously been a huge impact on local economy. The first lockdown was a challenge. The uncertainty over the furlough scheme is another reason why we think that we might continue to see newly vulnerable people entering into the system. There are significant financial impacts of self-isolation for those on 0-hour contracts and with less regular work. And we are concerned that people might not know where to go for support if they haven't accessed support previously. Will they be willing to ask for help? Because there is a dignity issue here and a confidence issue. And how do we, as a group, as a group of statutory services, at community services, and community groups work together to get people through the door in a way that is swift, gets them the help that they need, and is maintaining their dignity. We have got a lot of opportunity through multidisciplinary teams across a number of sectors. We have been intelligence as well as sharing staff previously. So what we wanted to do is harness that partnership working that Tracy has described and take that forward, but with a particular view to how we identify people who might not have experienced financial or other hardship previously. And this really links into how we as a council have and a community have looked to plan our recovery or growing forward, as we've been calling it. I think there's been an acceptance that the pre-COVID normal was letting swathes of our community down, and that we need to be maybe thinking about the way we engage with our communities and continue to try and be community-led, and look at the local resilience forum and the groups that operate within that as our eyes and ears, and add and improve our ability to get voices from right across the community into the 4 key policy-making collaborative groups that are in the blue there. And underpinning it all, I think, is an acceptance that during COVID, we all have had the shared vision, shared values. We've shared data and resource, but we've also identified really what matters to our residents and our communities, what our priorities are. And I think that in planning and growing forward, we can continue to have those deep conversations with our residents, both as a council and as a community. One of the key things that we need to continue to do is forward plan key dates, for instance, lockdown, and the end of lockdown. You know, how that's going to affect the furlough scheme, for instance, and things which will impact on people's ability to work. So we have developed a forward plan, which is an ongoing piece of work. We want to retain and continual. I can't say that. Put my teeth back in. Continue to review and revisit the connections and relationships within the BC LRF so that it is fit for purpose. It's still a really quickly changing scene, and we need to make sure that that BC LRF has the right people on it and is doing the right kind of listening, and helping us to build community wealth and continue to be community led. We want to make sure that we're looking at ways to listen more deeply to our communities and to their leaders, no matter where they sit within the democratic chain, and also pick up the less formal intelligence. And what we're doing is part of the growing forward is trying to develop an engagement framework that we can all use right across the public sector to make sure that we are all listening as deeply as possible and using that community voice to plan and deliver policy. And part of that is about maintaining those shared visions, values, maintaining sharing of intelligence, and seeing how we can continue to share resource in a way that benefits the community as a whole. And one of the key things that I think that we will be looking at in the next 6 months is a reset of some of those collaborative policy making groups that were in the blue on that concentric rings, to again make sure that they are fit for purpose and are sufficiently close to the community to ensure that community voices can be heard. So unless I've missed anything, Tracy, what we will do is I will share these slides with committee admin. We'll also share a bit of the data that is coming through the wider structure on current requests for assistance from the 0800 number that Tracy described, and also share the electronic version of the support booklet, which is being posted out so that members have access to that. So I guess it's just open to questions now.
Thank you, Alec. Thank you, Tracy. Could you put the presentation down if you can, so we can see members? But first, I've got Councillor Blizzard wants to ask a question.
Yeah, no, I'm not so much a question, but I just wanted to thank Alec and Tracy for all the hard work and all the team, all the organisations that have been part of this, because I had many conversations with Alec in the early days as someone shielding, trying to do my bit and talking to community groups, and to see it all come together in such a coherent fashion for our communities. I just think that everybody concerned, from you guys down to the community groups, I just think our community from top to bottom have just been brilliant. They've just done such a good job, and I just wanted to say that, and because I don't think you guys get enough thanks, so I just wanted to. I think probably that we'll all agree that you've all done a fantastic job. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Sean. I'll echo that. I think I can say this on behalf of the exec and all elected members on both sides of whichever party. Thank you for the tremendous amount of work and dedication and compassion you've shown in delivering the support you have so far, and keep it up. I've got Councillor Edwards, Hazel Edwards, sorry.
Yeah, hi. It's just a question, actually. But first of all, I'd like to thank you both for the presentation and for the way in that you've both been coordinating things. It's very impressive. And thank you, Tracy, for all the dozens of emails that you produce as well, with all the detailed information. Just a small question. The hubs for Roosecote and Harcourt. Roosecote is on Walney. It's miles away. Roosecote don't have a bus service, and I think it's causing some concern. Alec mentioned about people's pride and things. They won't ring up. Harcourt, it's in Schneider Road. Similarly, it's not easier to get to Schneider Road unless you go to the town hall and back again. Could you consider somebody, however often, being in those wards just to be available to see if it's necessary, perhaps once a week or something like that? Thank you.
If I could just tackle so the hubs were predominantly places where food was stored and then delivered. Again, I understand the point about that hub being quite away from the ward that it serves, but the vast majority of work was done in food dropping off rather than residents coming through the doors. And again, the kind of, we were fortunate enough just to try and have to kind of coordinate what the community had set up themselves. So, I mean, we can certainly have a conversation around whether there is a need to get something closer to those wards. And I know that Tracy's community development team are adept at looking at that. So I'm sure we can have a look at assessing that. But again, we have been led by where the community have been able and willing to set things up. And again, it hasn't been so much kind of people accessing the hubs as a pantry service. It has been more a delivery of food to residents who have asked for it.
Thank you.
Thanks for answering that, Alec. I think it's important. It's been a thread throughout the LRF because I'm a member on it. To make sure we are reaching everybody we can possibly reach. So if there's any gaps with people accessing stuff online, we make sure there's the helpline phone numbers, and we've been targeting certain areas for delivering leaflets maybe. So it's something you have to bear in mind. I think that's a fair point. I've got Councillor Hamilton next.
Thanks, Chair. Absolutely spot on. It just, maybe I should have declared an interest with being a county councillor or whatever, because it's there. But who cares about what council's doing what? Now, this is a good for the community. Absolutely brilliant. One of the concerns, as you know, Chair, and as Alec knows, and whatever, what they did, Tracy or Alec didn't mention, we've also been funding the likes of Abbotsford Community Centre, Ramside, Village Hall, and whatever, because they've been getting no money in. And once we start losing facilities like they do for the people of the area, when they start closing, they never seem to reopen. So we've been looking at that aspect as well. But just to go on about the area team and the town hall team, absolutely wonderful. The housing doing the grants, the civil enforcement officers, instead of doing things, they're dropping food off. From what we were saying before, distribution centres for the food, like Springmount, covering Rysdale and whatever. That's how they're getting delivered. But can I just say, this just shows you, I know there's a little bit of stigma involved, or, well, we don't claim that, we don't claim this. In these days of COVID-19, who cares and whatever. We're looking after the community of Barrowin Furnace and looking out at everybody and the council services, and plus our partners from the third sector. Well done.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't see any more hands up. I just want to take the opportunity myself. As I said before, I am involved in the LRF, and to be completely honest, it was a new way of delivering sort of support. It had a few bumps along the way, which is understandable and expected. It was refreshing the way suddenly a lot of the barriers traditionally dropped, or we certainly got over them, from organisations being quite precious, to be honest, about what they do, and rightly so, because they've got to fight for funding. It's a competitive market, unfortunately, but all those dropped away when it was needs of the community which were at stake. And I want to thank you both again, but also all the other groups who are on the LRF and all the community organisations and all the staff and officers who've been flexible in changing what they're doing. And we've had volunteers from BE helping with certain aspects of it. One question I would want to ask is the continuation of this beyond, so in the recovery phase, Alec mentioned the going forward, but I certainly think from our point of view, it should be a solid commitment, not to draw back into the old ways of working, which will be easy to do once everybody gets a chance to actually catch a breath and reflect. So I would want to actually recommend this is something we should analyse, reflect on, and see it as an outstanding support and a successful way to achieve sort of aims and the targets we set out right in the first place. We're not over this yet. I think the community has to be commended by the way the rates have come down lately and heading the right way, and that's thanks to the support that allows them to do that. So it is vital we continue with this on this approach. And I used the word compassion before, but it's a thread that goes through all the LRF when they go together on the calls. It's finding where the need is. Is it already being addressed by someone else? If not, we'll put some in place. It's as simple as that. I think it's just been a phenomenal achievement. So thank you for the presentation. Right, if there's no more questions or comments, I'd like to move on now to I think it's agenda item 9, planning for the future. The white paper consultation. Would Helen Houston, Development Services Manager, present the report on planning for the future white paper consultation, please?
Hi, thanks, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I'm just going to talk very briefly about the Planning for the Future white paper, which was produced by the government. I'm just getting my presentation up. Produced by the government in the summer, and is looking at the reforms for the existing planning system. So the intention with the reforms are to simplify what is a complex system currently, to reduce the length of time it takes to adopt a local plan, to reduce the complexity of supporting evidence for planning decisions and local plan examinations, particularly around housing and viability, which are often contested by developers, and also to bring forward changes to technological advancements in the planning system, to improve negotiation of developer contributions during planning applications, which can often be complicated and take time, and also to increase the number of houses that are being built across the country. Firstly, I think that most of those sentiments, nobody would particularly disagree with them, but there are some concerns about the reforms and how they would affect how planning works in Barrow. So I'm just quickly going to run through the high-level changes put forward in the consultation, and then some of the issues which we've covered in our response. So the format of the consultation is a series of proposals which are to radically transform the planning system. And these are set around 3 pillars, 3 themes within the document. I'm just going to run through each theme in turn quickly. So first pillar is pillar 1, development. And this is to simplify the role of local plans, to identify land under 3 different categories. There's the growth category, which is land that's suitable for substantial development, where outline approval would be automatic if it was specified in the local plan. Secondly, there's the renewal category, which is land that is suitable for development. Normally we would term that densification or infill, so there'd be a presumption in favour of development in those areas. And then the third category is the protected area, where development will be restricted, and this would often have other designations on that land, such as a SSSI, green wedge or conservation area. So under the reforms, the plans would contain area-specific requirements, but the general policy would be in a national policy document, which would make the local plan for each authority shorter. The new local plan should be more visual and map-based, and some of the tests of soundness have been altered, and the duty to cooperate, which is the duty for different neighbouring authorities to cooperate between each other, is to be removed. There'll be a new time frame for adopting a local plan, which will be reduced to 30 months. And at the moment, the average local plan takes between 6 and 7 years, so that is quite a reduction in time. And there'd also be a housing target that was set by the government. For development management or planning applications, this would mean that the policies would be established at a national level and not in the local plan. So we would have to produce design guides and codes locally to cover the gap between the national policies and local circumstances. The intention would be to introduce software that would standardise the process across the country, so that validation of planning applications and monitoring was done the same in each local authority, and that it might be possible to speed up processes by having that software automatically check or screen developments when they were submitted to an authority. As I mentioned, there would outline permission would automatically be given in areas that was designated as growth areas, and then we would have a reserve matters application for agreeing any outstanding issues. There'd be a new route that doesn't exist at the moment for applications in renewal areas, where they'd have to be pre-specified development, and that would be a different type of planning application to what exists at the moment. There's a real emphasis that the deadlines for dealing with planning applications should be firm, and that the 8-week and 13 deadline should be met on almost all occasions. And in order to increase efficiency, that national standardisation of some planning conditions. So the second pillar is called Beautiful and Sustainable Places. This is about making sure that places are rooted in local character, that there'll be central guidance for design in each local authority. So each authority would have a chief officer for design and placemaking. There's a theme within the document called the Fast Track for Beauty, which is about incentivising high quality development. And the framework for assessing the environmental impact of schemes would be simplified, again, to speed the process up. There is information in there about the framework for historic environment and heritage buildings, and also around energy efficiency, although this detail is limited, and we have mentioned this in our response. The third pillar is infrastructure and connected places. So a new infrastructure levy would be charged as a fixed percentage of development. And this would mean that the current system for planning obligations, which are often either Section 106s or Section 78s, that are normally dealt with our planning committee, would be abolished. And a new pot would be created where revenues were collected in the central pot and spent locally. Again, relating to infrastructure, as I mentioned, increased use of digital technology would improve the experience of users of the planning system. And it would also enable a more centralised monitoring of how each planning authority was performing. The document does also set out that fees for planning applications would continue to be set nationally, so each authority would be bound by that. And other consultees and the planning inspectorate would also be subject to a performance framework. So just in summary, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, some of the themes and the ideas behind the reforms we obviously would agree with and would want to see. However, there are some concerns that I mentioned in the report in detail, just that one size doesn't fit all for each local authority. We are all very different. For small authorities like Barrow, some of the issues wouldn't be the same for a larger urban authority. There would obviously be resource and financial implications. For the authority, we would have to get new software to be compatible with the national software arrangements, and that obviously may be a resource implication of that. And also we would have to replace our local plan, which was only adopted in 2019, so there would be a cost implication of that as well. We've also touched on the issue that it appears that the role of members in decision making would be reduced because not as many planning applications would need to go to committee, and there'd be a loss in the local flavour of policy and in the local characteristics of Barrow Borough and about what makes it special and unique. We've also raised concerns about the blanket approach to having the 3 designations within the local plan. At the moment, there isn't a quantified measure of what constitutes substantial development. If it is a really high level of development, it possibly would be too high for Barrow anyway, and because we wouldn't have enough land or the demand for that level of development. So we need more information about what substantial development is. There's also less flexibility, it appears, without more detail. And also it appears that there'd be less opportunity for public engagement, particularly with neighbouring authorities, as the duty to cooperate would be removed. And finally, it generally feels like very focused on housing, the consultation document, and ourselves and many other statutory consultees and other local authorities have just raised the question of, well, what about the other issues that are important for Barrow, such as climate change, the environment, health, employment. It is on the face of it very housing focused. Obviously we've submitted our response now. It was taken through Planning Policy Working Group. It is the first step on for the government to now look at consultation responses that were received and decide on the way forward, and hopefully we'll be given more detail and more opportunity to comment further in the future. That's the end of my presentation, Chair.
Thank you. That's very, very good. And you summed up well, because a lot of the notes I made on reading it, you summed up in your sort of your concerns. I'll open it up. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, Helen, I don't know whether I missed it, but is there any provision in that document for appeals? What will happen with appeals?
There is a little bit of information on appeals. Again, there isn't a lot of detail. There is a suggestion, which is all I can say about it really. It isn't, as I say, the detail isn't there, that potentially if a council were to lose an appeal, then the appellant would have their fees refunded. Which obviously, again, that wouldn't be something that we particularly agree with, because obviously dealing with an application still needs resource, whether it's approved or refused, so that wouldn't necessarily be a good thing, I don't think. But appeals would appear to continue in the same way, so the right to appeal would still be there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think I read as well that there's a potential for more refusals and appeals if the 8 or 13-week deadline's adopted. So, which and that possibly puts greater powers in the hand of the developers. So that creates a bit of between what people think is in the best interest of the place. Is there any more questions or comments, please? No one's indicating, so shows you how good your presentation was, Helen, because you probably preempted a lot of the comments. What I will say is, personally, when I look through it all, the response, the consultation response, it seems to have picked up a lot of the themes I would have wanted to see in it. It's about making sure it's not a one-size-fits-all policy, which we know our part of the country's quite unique in many senses, but for planning, I suppose, with all the major industry, major developments and the disparate housing centres of housing, and what we would consider housing we want to put back into the market rather than just new housing. And so we need to have that our patch covered, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. And a lot of the climate and the sense of place and looking after our natural assets as well as into it. So I think it's a really good response. And I believe it's representative of the LGA and other councils' concerns as well. So I don't think we're going out on a limb or we're saying anything unusual here or extreme. And let's hope we're listened to. If no one's got any other comments, thank you for that, Helen. Should we move on to?
Does the committee agree the recommendations?
Oh, sorry, John. So if there's no, so should we take that as consensus, as no one's indicated?
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, if you're happy with John, we'll move on.
Yes.
So on to agenda item 10. Housing Adaptations Policy Review. Would Janice Sharp, Assistant Director of Housing, present the report on Housing Adaptations Policy Review, please?
Hi. Good afternoon, Chair. I'm bringing this policy for agreement. It's a Housing Adaptations Policy Review document with attached the new Housing Service Adaptation Policy. The report sets out an updated and refreshed housing adaptations policy, which has been reviewed. It was overdue, I must apologise, but it's to ensure that it remains fit for purpose. The policy is about people with disabilities who live in council-owned accommodation to maximise their independence and quality of life. The policy sets out a framework for how the council works with tenants and the families and care professionals. The policy deals only with council-owned accommodations. Under legislation, the council must use the money it uses from rental income from council properties to make these adaptations. We have included in the summary 1.3 that there is a budget available to support people with disabilities in the borough who live in privately owned or rented homes to fund adaptations. This is called the Disabled Facilities Grant, and there are details included in the summary for people to access for information so that they can apply for the grant as well. Because obviously, as it states, we're committed to supporting all residents to remain in their homes, which is confirmed in the council plan to live happy and healthy, productive lives. The current policy needed updating. It didn't comply with the Equality Act. Although the policy reforms that requires a formal update, disabled adaptations are considered in line with the provisions of the Equality Act. Members are requested to have approved the housing adaptations policy as attached in the appendices. The scope of the policy is to deal with aids and adaptations and equipment or special features and fittings to improve access to the individual's home, to improve an individual's mobility in and around their home or help with daily living. There's two categories, there's minor and major. Self-explanatory to a certain extent. Minor is handrails, helping people get in and out of the bath, to major ones, which we've got, I think 2 were brought to exec last time. Major ones which include major works to properties to enable severely disabled people to live as independent as possible. We do encourage people, if possible, when they need an adaptation, if there is a suitably adapted property already there, to move to that. But it isn't council policy to, I don't like the word, force people to move. It is suggested. However, many of our customers have lived there many years, and it has been members' policy always to try and help people remain in their own home where possible. We currently have a budget from the HRA, the Housing Revenue Account, of 100,000. With the amount of money that's being spent now on adaptations and the increase in the work needed, we are looking to increase the budget this year when we do our budget setting. I've also got delegation to agree adaptations that cost under 45,000 because it was minority, it was 10,000 initially. Obviously 10,000, for example, a stair lift and a wet room can cost just short of 10,000. And that isn't an uncommon adaptation in many of our properties. So it's been increased to up to 45,000. Obviously all adaptations are considered as reasonable. Obviously if you've got a property that's got 10 steps up and 10 steps out the back, is it reasonable to adapt it with a stair lift when people can't actually access the properties? So we always consider the reasonable and practicality of an adaptation at all times, in conjunction with obviously the occupational therapists. We don't profess to be medically trained. We work closely with them with the recommendations, and the family or the person involved, so that it's a joint approach that we make a decision of the most suitable adaptation for everybody involved. I think that clarifies everything. I presume there may be some questions. Chair?
Yeah, thank you, Janice, that was good. I've got...
Sorry.
Kevin? You're still on mute, mate.
Thanks, Chair. It's a cruel, cruel world when we've got adaptation money for the given by the government, and we can't spend it, and yet it's illegal to spend it on council properties. The private landlords can spend it, but it comes to social landlords and whatever, and we're completely driven out of it. And they're not forgetting what Jan's saying there, that £100,000 actually come out of our maintenance budget. to pay for adaptations. And you're going about equality. Well, there's nothing equal about social housing not being able to go in the disabled facilities adaptations granting what's given to the private landlords. And it's absolutely, I just can't get my head around it, Chair, to tell you the truth. We've got everything there and whatever, and some of the, when it used to be £10,000 budget, and you had to explain to people, and it's gone up to £100,000, and quite rightly so, and quite rightly, Jan's got the delegated power from the £45,000. Can you imagine what an ordeal it must be to explain to somebody? I know you got the occupational therapist, but to say, well, I suffer from this, I suffer from that, I suffer from this, and yet we could be sending money back to the government because we can't spend it. Absolutely obscene. Anyway, that's my rant over and done with. And I like to move it, Jed, just to move it on a bit.
Any other questions, please? No, no one's indicating. So I'll just say I wholeheartedly agree with what Councillor Hamilton just said. Spending money on council-owned property, which will stay to the benefit of the resident, and they would only move on to another resident's benefit should they move out, seems the more sensible way than actually using council money or another funding private housing being adapted, and that's the benefit of the owner of the house. So I completely agree. It doesn't seem fair or a sensible way to do it. So on that note, I've got a mover. Have we got a seconder, please?
Some Maddox.
Okay. If everyone's in agreement, I'll take that as a consensus.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you.
Right, moving on. Budget timetable and assumptions. Sue Roberts, Director of Resources, present the report on the budget timetable and assumptions, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is the annual budget setting report. So we've got timetable and assumptions. The timetable in terms of the formal meetings is the same as any other year. The process behind the scenes has started a lot later than usual due to kind of closing the accounts late. We're working on COVID measures and ongoing COVID measures. So we are kind of double tasked at the moment, trying to close out last year and set next year's budget. There are kind of some allowances I can make within the timetable, but not a lot. Unfortunately, the engagement is reduced, so engagement with members is much reduced from what I would have hoped to have done for the budget coming up. And that's reflected in the consultation that I'll come to in a moment. In terms of the assumptions, they're on the appendix. There's a number that I've shaded in, highlighted it, and they are likely to be impacted by ongoing COVID consequences, what we want to call them. And I mean, that's going to be our income. Will our income recover by April the 1st? I doubt it. And the impact on council tax and business rates is going to run over a number of years. At the moment, I've instructed my team to build the figures as they usually would. And when it comes to the committee, I will explain why there are some stresses on those figures, because we still need to set a balanced budget at the end of the day. There may need to be a dip into reserves to keep next year balanced, but I'll see once those figures are produced. The other assumptions are the general assumptions we usually make around inflation, service demand, things like that, and we will reflect on those when we get into the year and adjust the budget accordingly. With this year, we've seen a higher pay award than the budget assumed, so we deal with that in the year. So the budget is our best guess, but we are kind of budgeting a little bit later than usual, and part of that is because of I need to see the impact on our income from COVID. The consultation, now normally when you do budget consultation, you have a number of proposals or changes to bring into the budget, and it's asking the public for their views on those. So are there any choices? Is it one thing or another? We're not actually able to do that, not just because of time, but we haven't been able to align the budget with the council plan entirely. We're sort of still doing it, so we haven't got anything to publish. So I'm suggesting, as we have in previous years, we ask for input into like a longer term review of the council's got a certain amount of resource and it can be used in different ways, so it's more the different ways than, you know, where we're going to take money out of. So the usual questions are around the council tax. Obviously, you know, that increase does give us more revenue to use. Our medium term plan currently expects that income, so if that's not there, then we'd have to find something to replace it. But it's asking the public what services are important and what maybe should be paid for services. You know, where could we get some more money coming in terms of service income? Obviously that's one of the areas that's hit a little bit at the moment, but this is looking forward. So I'm looking at not just the budget we've got to set, but looking at the medium term finances as well when we ask these questions. So I was proposing to put something together onto the website and get it on social media. We don't get a huge response, and I said there's nothing really exciting to ask about this time, unfortunately, but I still want that input from the public, or at least to ask for that. And it would run so that I could get that back in time to feed into the proposals before they're brought to committee. And that's it. So it's just the setup to the budget. The work is now happening, so a bit later than planned, but in terms of what members see formally, it will be as any other year. I was just hoping to be able to do some bit more informal meetings and briefings. I'll still try to do that, but I'm not sure of timing, to be honest. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Has anyone got any questions or comments? I don't see anyone indicating. I can't believe you're using a worldwide pandemic as an excuse, Sue. That's shocking. I know for the consultation, we do use social media as a council more than we used to, so hopefully that'll be enough for now. But yeah, I know we intended to do a bit more of a deeper approach to it and trying to reach people who don't normally talk, but contribute to our engagement. So the recommendation is to note the budget timetable, note the budget assumptions, and agree the approach to the budget station. So if there's no disagreement there, can we agree that by consensus? Thank you. Right, moving on. Council finances. That's you again, Sue.
Thank you. Yes, this is the council finances. I want to say quarterly, but I had to skip a quarter, and I'm not going to why. So we've got a half-year position. The report is a bit different to usual because there isn't the time and resource available to do the detail work I would usually do. So it's quite a high-level summary for members, but I still need you to be aware of the financial position overall within the authority. So what I've got in the report is kind of the general fund as a whole. Normally I would bring it by a divisional split. That split is actually being reviewed because we've got a different senior management team, so I need to align the reporting to that service structure. But for the time being, because there's quite a lot of other things in the report, I just started bringing the summary level. Now that summary table is excluding the COVID additional spend, which is funded, so that's outside of our core budget. And I've also reduced the income where we're not going to receive that, because that's also coming from COVID income. So I didn't want to show those exceptional overs, if you like, because they are covered by the COVID funding, emergency funding that we've had. So excluding those items, our core budget is looking okay as a half-year position. There's nothing jumping out as an exception, and I've kind of made a few notes underneath, so you can see, you know, where I have looked into where I'm seeing bigger numbers than I would normally be comfortable with, but not big enough to raise as an exceptional item. I have done a little bit of investigation, and there's quite a bit because of the employee kind of side of things particularly April to July, we didn't recruit. People had left us, but we weren't in a position to set up how we were going to recruit in a virtual world, in effect, and we've done that now. So those kind of temporary one-off savings won't carry on for the rest of the year. And we are filling gaps in staffing sometimes from external support. So just on a temporary basis, that tends to cost a little bit more though. So some of that saved money will be spent in the second half of the year. So there's nothing kind of jumping out as exceptions. I've excluded a few of the sort of technical accounting and housing benefit payments because they kind of come in and out, and I find those big numbers, they're kind of distortional really. It's not something you can influence, it just happens. So this really is looking at the direct cost side of things and direct income. That will be the normal table, but it will be split up by those reporting divisions next time. So if I move on to what became the bulk of the report, the COVID funding, there's quite a lot of different funding streams, all good, and yes, I'll have it all, but it's quite a lot to kind of contain. So if I just go through them, I'll not like do too much detail, but we've got the emergency funding. So that's the funding that the government's given to authorities to fill the gaps in the budget. So it's the income that we've not realised because car parks have been closed, the forum is closed, other services are impacted because of other things that are not happening. And we've also got additional costs, and sometimes we're able to redeploy staff and we don't need additional staff, but I would say more often those staff are working more. So there's more capacity there from people working more, but you obviously have to pay for that. So we haven't had a huge spend in terms of kind of supply side of things. We've definitely spent on the IT side of the business to get the virtual or the agile working up and running, and so that was done quite quickly. So we've had to kind of keep that going. We're now looking at a more permanent solution for that. But most of this funding is actually kind of supporting the continual services like leisure and things that are going to struggle, especially again now we're locked down, that their income source is gone as well. So it's kind of a bit of a mixture of a few things, but basically the gap in our budget is filled by this funding, which is what it was intended for. We also have a little bit of new burdens money. That's the new burdens money for the grant administration work that we've been doing, and there's some changes on the benefit side of things. So that funding altogether, that funding will at the moment looks like it will meet the shortfall in the budget. But moving into next year with those items, I think that there's no kind of announcement of any funding that goes beyond the 31st of March. That's why I'm trying to reflect those challenges in our budget that I propose. The hardship relief, that's the council tax relief, but it's also where we've sliced a bit away and created our own local welfare, local hardship scheme that we're receiving bids into through the LRF work, and the partners on there, and they're kind of, the need is identified and the partner will stand up to, I'll do that, I can do this. And I've just put a list there of so far. I'm sure we did a couple more last week, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But you can see even in that list, it's quite a spread. It's not all like one organisation. They're all partner up and not stepping on each other's toes. They've all got quite clear roles, which seems really good to me. I'm seeing it more as when the bids come in, I can see the partnerships working between them and they complement each other in what they're providing. So as a sort of, I'm not in the LRF, but I see how it works. It does seem very effective. I'm pleased that we can put that support in place for them. We are tracking the spend on that and the relief, because that's a pot of money that will go back at 31st of March, and we don't want to give any back, so we will be keeping tabs on that all the way through. The business support grants, that's the original grants, just that note there of what we received, what we gave out, how we did it. Business rate relief, we are receiving money now for the reliefs that were we've awarded. So we've awarded additional reliefs under government's instructions to hospitality and retail leisure. And because we can't collect that money now because it's a zero bill, the government give us the money instead as a Section 31 grant. So those grants have started to come through. It's not additional money, it replaces the money we would have collected. But when they sort of appear in the financial reporting, it will push up our budget because we'll receive the grants that we need to then distribute. This is to the preceptors, not to businesses themselves, but it just means more money is coming through the council. Then test, trace and support. I tend to call these self-isolation payments. Sorry, I know it's not the proper name, but I get confused with the track and trace, test and trace. So these are the ones that are going to people when they apply, when they've had the NHS kind of referral to stay home and they have low income. I think I brought the policy last time. It's when people apply for that £500, they're coming through from a mandatory entitlement and a discretionary entitlement. So we've got those coming through. I've put the numbers on there. They were just at a point in time. We've had more applications since then. And we're automatically considering the mandatory payment and then discretionary payment. So you don't have to apply twice. It's all one process. And there's some new burdens money going to come in for that work as well. So then the track and trace, that's the public protection team doing the contact tracing, as I would call it. That funding was given through the Public Health Authority, so it's shared around Cumbria, and it lasts for 12 months, and it's to support the team, public protection team. And I think that there might even be some more money coming for that work because it's been sort of observed and it's very effective, and I think it's something that government wants to increase. Obviously, to react to that initially meant a diversion of resources to make sure we could provide that, but we are looking to recruit some more temporary staff into that service to kind of ease the pressure on the existing team, because they've got statutory duties as well. So you can't just juggle it. You can just delay some things, but we don't want to do that. So we need to increase the capacity to keep everything running with the track and trace and all the regulatory duties that we have. Compliance and enforcement, that's the funding for it's kind of, I've called it like an ambassador role, but it's to make sure the social distancing is observed. And I think it's kind of like in town centres and places that you might get gatherings of people. Not there's anything wrong with that, but social distancing measures do seem to be working, so it's kind of having eyes out there to make sure those sort of things are observed and are happening, and just a bit of education for people, a reminder really. And then we've got the Contain Outbreak Management Fund. So that's announced as the £3 per person, because we had tier 2 prior to lockdown. That's a fund that comes through the county council because it's to cover a number of aspects. It's not just sort of something that we do, it is something that the county will perform part of the work and we will do part of the work. So there's a conversation ongoing at the moment with districts and county to establish who's doing what, and then we'll pick up our part of that. It could be used for the additional contact tracing, but it's also kind of communications, how to reach people, and it's like who's going to do that. Is the county best placed or is the district best placed? So that's a conversation being had at the moment. Local restriction support grant. Now, since I wrote this, it's changed. So where I've got those 3-2-10 and 3-2-11, I'll just kind of put those together for a minute. So we've got local restriction support grant. That's now a mandatory grant for particular business sectors, and there's an open pot and a closed pot. So the open pot is if you're in tier 2 or tier 3, then there's a grant to be paid to the businesses that are open but struggling because of the social distancing measures. So that's generally going to be leisure and hospitality and the accommodation sector to a degree as well. So that's a grant that they would be able to apply for. There are some conditions and criteria, as there are with all the schemes, and we're working those up now, nearly ready. I thought I was going to go live today, but I can't. There was a call today with officials, and there's some criteria I need to tweak within the scheme. So that's the open scheme. The closed scheme is for now, while we're in lockdown, the businesses that are mandated to close are entitled to a grant to cover the 28-day period. And that's, again, another scheme almost ready to be open to applications. And it is the list of businesses that have been mandated to close. So, we do know who that will be, who that will impact. And we'll get some more stuff on the website as well. And then what originally was going to happen, there was going to be the grants I've mentioned plus a discretionary part. Well, instead we've got the local restriction support grant, open, closed, and there's also a sector one, but I'll not go on about that. Then there's another one called the additional restrictions grant. So the additional restrictions grant, that's the discretionary pot of money, and that's to last from now till March 22 if we choose to run it that long, if it lasts that long, because it's a finite pot of money. And the scheme needs to be developed for that. Work's underway. That's more of a kind of a conversation around Cumbria as well, because we don't want it to be a postcode type of thing, so you get more if you're there, less if you're there, and also agree the sectors of business that should be able to get that support. But it is kind of considering the people that are outside the business rate system, which does make information gathering a little bit more of a task, because we know less about those businesses than we do people on the business rate system. But the restriction grants are the local restriction support grants, they're for business rated properties, whereas the other one is the discretionary one is for the others. It could still include some on the business rates side that are not covered by the local restriction support. That's the decision to be made, and say that it's a finite pot of money. Now with the other one, with the first one, the local restriction support grant, if there's another what do I mean? If there's another lockdown later on, or if we go from tier 2 to tier 3, or you get more money, basically. That's a mandatory scheme. So every time that scheme is engaged, more money comes along. But the discretionary scheme, there's no more money. So it's kind of deciding whether to hold some of that back in case something else happens. We go up a tier, we have another lockdown, because if we've spent it all, then we won't be able to support the businesses outside business rates again. So it's quite tricky, that one. That's the conversation with the LEPA joined into that, hooked into that whole conversation to try to get a consensus, but do something that is kind of it's not future proof, but something that's not just give it all out now, we've got nothing left. So there's quite a bit of work to do on the criteria with that one. So the mandatory schemes will open before the discretionary scheme, but I would hope there's not too much of a gap between them. Oh, sorry, I should have said, actually, with the local restriction support grant, we've got 1.5 million and the additional restrictions 1.3. So 1.3 for the 15 or so months that it might last. Reopening the high street safely, that's one that started when we reopened the high street back in July. That runs until the end of March. Obviously, there's going to be more work to do after this lockdown period, and that's underway. We've already spent some. This is one where we have to claim it back from ERDF funding. So it's quite don't want to say rigmarole, but there's quite a lot to it when you've got ERDF funding. We have a very high level of evidence required, and sometimes we just need to react and do these things. So we will look at the spend and we might move some of it into our emergency funding stream. But obviously we do want to maximise that money, and we'll look at doing that before March. And then I've put on there the Culture Recovery Fund, which is the forum they bid for the Culture Recovery Fund and got 100,000, and that's going to allow them to run a programme, a subsidised programme, which we couldn't afford to do, to get people back into some kind of culture and arts, which is great news. And they had just started that, actually, so I'm sure they'll be able to sort of turn it back on when we've finished lockdown. So there's quite a chunk kind of coming through the council in terms of COVID funding. Some of it is for ourselves, but a lot of it is coming in and going out, and it's just a lot of work to set up those processes. There's quite a lot of compliance required by government, more so the second time round because they were a little bit freer with us first time round, and now we're all scrabbling to provide the assurances and documentation that they now want. So this time round it's trying to do that as a system from the beginning to the end that gives them what they want as we go along rather than after the event. So then moving on to general fund reserves, just estimating there the year-end balance. We're calling on our reserves for our own spend as planned, things like Marina Village that we already knew we were working on. So we're just drawing down the reserves as we'd normally do for those things. And I'll update that again in the normal quarter report. And medium-term plan, so I've updated that for the pay award. I mentioned it was higher than the budget, so it's 50,000. It obviously rolls on each year as the base is now increased. And I've put an initial estimate of the impact of COVID in 2021/22 because the medium term should really reflect what you think is going to happen moving forward. What I have done also is reduce the amount we were going to put, I was suggesting we were going to put into the volatility reserves, the income volatility, because we need to use it. So that's why it was going into reserves. But if we need it to balance the budget, then that's what we will do. And the balance will go into reserves rather than the sum total. So that little projection there is just showing that we've got a balanced medium-term position. Obviously, a lot of the assumptions and estimates will be revisited as part of the budget setting that we're doing now. So I'll be bringing it like a refreshed medium-term projection with the budget in February. And then my last section is about procurement matters, a couple of procurement matters. So we've got the contract for our contracts of the gas and electricity. We use the County Council as a framework, and they use YPO. Pretty sure that's Yorkshire Purchasing Organisation, but maybe don't quote me. And we buy our energy as a whole unit, if you like, because it's much cheaper to do that. And so that work has been done, and the contract has been awarded to Corona Energy, and we spend around 130 a year. And so I asked about the green energy. I mean, I should know really, gas isn't green, but there was an option to get biogas. It's quite expensive though, so obviously I can't afford another 65,000 on top of the 130, but I was suggesting the town hall building is switched over, if you know what I mean, to a green tariff, because there's so many things happening with the building, with future high streets and potential, a little bit of redesign going on, and the purpose of it, intentions of it, low carbon work. It's a bit of a flagship, really. So although it means spending another 5,000 or 6,000, I am suggesting members consider that tariff is applied to the town hall. It can be applied to other buildings throughout the contract as we go along, but also maybe gas is not an energy we want to use massively, and we could look at alternative energy sources for some of the buildings maybe. Then we've got a couple of, the next three are all putting formal placeholders onto tendering. So we've got the heating and ventilation, servicing and maintenance. It is a rolling contract, but members probably aware from reports that you've seen, we're looking at contracting very differently, and we want to put an end date on rolling contracts so that we go to market and formally award for a fixed period as you normally would. I mean, you could have an extension, but it's not a rolling extension in that way. So we've got the heating and ventilation, and also the public building cleaning and the housing common parts. That's one contract together. So we're saying all of those should be extended to 31st of March 21. So that would mean work starts now to get a new contract in place for April 21. That might not mean a new contractor because everybody's open to bid. So I don't mean a new contract, I mean a new contract, just to be clear in case anyone wonders. And then the planting contract, we've already extended that once because we needed to, it hadn't been tendered for years and years. The work was going to take place during this summer, but it couldn't. The officers involved, myself included, just couldn't free up the time to do that. And looking at sensibly at when the planting is ordered and then planted and hung, there's quite a gap of time needed. So I'm suggesting we go for, so September 21 would be the spring 22 baskets, but if the contract is tendered and awarded by September, and then that means the summer afterwards would be with the new contract. Again, I don't mean a different contractor necessarily, but it's a new contract arrangement. That just tidies those up and gives us those cut-off points that we can give firm dates to officers to lead on those tenders for us. And that's it, I think. Oh, no, sorry, can I just mention, I think I've covered the recommendations. Apart from, I just specifically wanted to say that with the COVID schemes that are coming along, I'm asking for delegation to administer those and design any discretionary schemes, because the timing isn't really working with, well, I would never wait, I would always open them anyway, but in effect, I really should be coming to members and saying, can I open this scheme up? On behalf of the council, kind of thing. So I'm just asking if members are comfortable for me to just, get on with those. They're pretty detailed guidance. There's not a lot of discretion, even though sometimes there is. It's often just, this is the scheme, needed to deliver it. So sorry, I didn't pull that out of the COVID section when I went through it, but that was a request. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. I've got Councillor Hayes-Edwards like to comment or ask a question.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Sue, for all that. You're doing an exceptional job with managing the grants. I hate to think how much time you've spent on it, but don't tell us. But there is a tremendous amount of funding from different sources coming from the government. That can't be disputed. It's there in black and white. And I'm glad that the gap in the budget, as you said, has been filled by the COVID funding that is in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've got Councillor Pemberton.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Sue.
Hiya.
Add to what Hazel's just said, there must have been a terrific increase in the workload for you and your team. All the grants, loans, allocations, controls caused by dealing with the COVID-19 virus. You seem to have been coping okay and balancing the books, keeping your finger on the pulse. So I'll just say well done, thank you.
Thank you. That's very kind. I do have a good team. Missing a few people, but if I can do a bit of recruitment, I sure will be a bit happier. But yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
I don't see anyone else wanted to comment. I just want to endorse the thanks that people have said. It's clear the enormous amount of work and the difficulty as well. Onerous some of these schemes have been to put in place. And the fact that late guidance, changing guidance, clarification at the last minute doesn't help deliver this. And there's a lot of pressure and a lot of stress and strain on local councils, and particularly ours, with our basically our resources available to us from staff point of view. So I think everyone's chipped in. So thank you very much. It's really, really, really is appreciated for you and everyone else who's been delivering all the support, financially and otherwise, during the pandemic. Phenomenal amount of work, and thank you. I do want to comment on what Councillor Edwards said about the, I think there was a tremendous amount of funding. There's been a concern through non-political groups as well, saying they're concerned that the councils won't be reimbursed, and it is holding the government to account to make sure they continue to do that. So while the demands are great on local councils, we do expect to be reimbursed for everything we spend in supporting the community and helping them do the right thing during the pandemic to actually get to a state where we can have some normality back. Thanks again for everything you do. I'll just quickly run through the recommendations so we're clear. So it's to note the general fund financial monitoring at 30th of September 2020, delegate authority to director resources to implement and administer COVID-19 schemes introduced by central government, delegate authority to resources to set any additional criteria for the discretionary payments linked to the COVID-19 schemes introduced by central government, note the procurement of the next gas contract and agree to purchase green biogas as part of the contract for the town hall site only, agree to formally extend the heating and ventilation servicing and maintenance contract to the 31st of March 2021. Agree and formally extend the public building and cleaning of housing common parts contract to the 31st of March 2021, and agree to formally extend the planting contract to include the 2021 and spring 2022 baskets. So I think if there's no, can we seek a mover? Do we need a mover second this?
We accept the recommendations.
Okay.
So second there.
Second.
Second now.
Right. Can we agree by consensus? No one's
Agreed.
agree, right?
Yeah.
No need for roll call. Thank you very much. Right. Number one now. Bear with.
Annual Treasury Management
Yes, yeah.
Statement, Chair.
It says item 13, annual treasury management statement. That's Sue again.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, so this is our annual statement. It's in a performance statement. At the start of each year with the budget, council set out the Treasury. It's called the Treasury Strategy Statement, but it's basically the policy for the year ahead. And it includes a number of indicators for prudence and Treasury management, like good management. The report and the appendice the appendice mainly presents that back, so that what we set out to do, has that been achieved and what are the numbers. So if I could just summarise, I'll summarise it in words, but if you want me to go into the appendix, I will. So it's a statutory statement for full, so it needs to go to full council to provide assurance that the treasury management activities were within policy and within the limits, so no limits were breached. And I can confirm everything was done in accordance with policy and we did not breach any of the limits. That's limits around borrowing, really. So, you know, if we haven't got the cash, why are we borrowing? What's going on? It's like a lot of indicators within the treasury management process that allow me to look at cash flow very quickly every day. So we have not breached throughout 1920 or this year. So the activity just saw really in a nutshell, we repaid one loan as expected. That was a HRA loan, part of the subsidy buyout that was a few years ago now. So the money was set aside by the HRA and has been repaid. And in terms of investment, everything's invested for security and liquidity. But yes, we make it a yield, and on last year we made 254,000 in interest. That is included in our budget. We did achieve more. I think I mentioned that at the outturn report. We did achieve more than expected. I think because we invest in building societies generally and some local authorities, we were able to do that for more often than not 6 months to 9 months, which gave us a better rate, but it was only with I said security in mind. We knew there were safe places to leave money off, and we go for 3 months, a bit shorter, but we were okay that year. We do check ratings, and we have a way of assessing who we're going to use as a counterparty. So really, that's it in a nutshell. We serviced the debt that we have, and we managed to earn just over $250,000 in interest, which we've brought back into the general fund. The cash flow for this year is looking a bit different, as you'd imagine, but last year was pretty standard. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sue. I've got no one indicating they want to speak, so can I have a mover and seconder for that, please?
Move it, Chair. Move the recommendation.
And I'll second it.
Thank you. If there's no objections, can I agree by consensus to that?
Agreed.
Thank you. Finally, outside bodies. I believe that's you, John.
It is, thanks, Chair. The report is self-explanatory and proposes changes to outside bodies. The Conservative group have asked to make changes to the Barrow Health and Wellbeing Forum, Barrow Wastewater Treatment Works and Life Leisure Partnership Board. Councillor Hall has been nominated for those 3 outside bodies. The Labour group have also asked to make changes to the International Nuclear Services Limited Ramsden Dock stakeholder group, Keep Our Future Afloat, Borough Local Committee Highways Advisory Group, and Member Training Working Group. I do need nominations for the 4 outside bodies, please.
Right, so just get my agenda back up. So for the outside bodies that you haven't got already, so for the Keeping Our Future Afloat, that'll be myself, John.
Yes.
Right, for the member training, can we Councillor Morgan, please? And for the highways group, I think that's the final one. Yeah, that's Councillor Brooke, please.
Councillor Brooke. We do have the International Nuclear Services Ramsden Dock stakeholder group.
And myself as well on that one, please.
Could I just say, Lee, the highways one, was that not Councillor Knott rather than Brooke?
Oh, it was, sorry, yeah. I've not got the emails because David was supposed to be doing this, so yeah, stand corrected. Thank you, John. Yeah, swap that over then, please, John.
Okay, thank you.
I think Councillor Hamilton's got his hand up.
You're muted, Councillor Hamilton.
I'm sorry about buttoning. They've been agreed, Chair.
Agreed. Oh, no, we've just nominated them to John now. We haven't agreed them yet.
Yeah, well, my question is on the following page.
Okay. So have you got in terms of your bit, John? Are you open for questions?
Yeah, I've noted all those changes, Chair. So it's whether the committee's in agreement with those nominations.
Yeah. Did you have a question before we move to that stage, Councillor Hamilton?
Just one check. On one side of the paper, it's Borough Local Committee. You turn the page over, it's Cumbria County Council's Area Committee. And it sounds like 2 complete identities, but it's just exactly the same. So it just puts you a little bit off local committee, you go to the Area Committee, which was last century. So could we be uniform in whatever known as Borough Local Committee, so there's no mix-ups?
That'll be noted in the minutes, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. Can we have a mover and seconder for the approval of the recommendations?
Move it, Chair.
I'll second.
Thank you. If it's a consensus, no objections, we can agree that.
Agreed.
Thank
you. Can I, just before the Chair, sorry, jumping in, can I just tell Sean and Sam that provisionally the 8th of next month is the first meeting for the Borderlands.
Can I just ask a question on that, Kev?
Yeah.
There's been no money assigned for that Borderlands partnership money, is there? I'm just getting reports in Dalton, people asking me that groups have been told that they're getting money. I don't know if it's just gossip or not, but if you could just clarify that for me. Because I was under the assumption that this group and the consultation was that nothing was set, that it's all open for people to put their 2 pence in, basically. So if you could clarify that for me, it'd be great.
Thanks, Sean. The way it works is the new body's got to be known as Dalton Borderlands Group, which will go out with consultation with the community, the businesses and everybody else in the partnership. They will make recommendations. There's £3 million being put aside, which we've got to tap into, but we've got to make a business case for each part of it. So the Dalton Borderlands group will make a recommendation to the local committee for what they're asking for. From there, it goes to the Borderlands itself, and from there, from Cabinet to release the money. But there's £3 million set aside. And we got it's there, but we've got to make the case for releasing the money by building a business case, if you will.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Does that satisfy your question, John?
Can I ask
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, certainly, Wendy.
Can I ask, will Dalton Council be asked anything on this at all?
Craig Fox.
Sorry?
Craig, through you, Chairman, Craig Fox is Dalton Town Council's representative.
Thank you. I didn't know that.
Can I suggest that if it's clear that the steering group's been set up and there's nothing been decided yet, so I think we can answer any questions outside of the meeting now, because it's obviously we've got a few questions about that. So it's certainly at the early stages of that, with terms of reference being set up and the steering group being established. Thank everyone for your input. I think that's the end of business. John?
Chair, can we just agree that Councillor Ronson and Blessard be nominated by the committee?
Certainly. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Thanks, John. Is that everything?
Well done, Chair.